paper round. We are a waste management company who service many of the sites in the Regent Street area and the Crown Estate. And today we're just going to do a presentation about recycling and just some of the things that we're going to go through. We're just going to talk generally about why we recycle. Often, it's a thing that a lot of us do, but we don't necessarily really think about why we're doing it. We'll talk about what happens to your waste and recycling and the end destinations that we send it to. Have a little look at your recycling figures for the whole Crown Estate. Understanding the issue of contamination, which is a big issue in the waste industry and is something that is becoming more prevalent with legislation that will come through. And then just a couple of tips and tricks to help with reducing contamination. So first of all, we've got to think about why we recycle. And just a couple of things whenever I think about it, just a couple of reasons why I recycle and why I think most of us recycle. The main thing is, protecting the environment and conserving resources. If you recycle an item, then it takes less energy and less materials dug up from the ground to then create a new item, so you're conserving resources. And then you go think about, more broadly speaking, as a business, your business reputation. If you've got high recycling rates and you have good waste management practices, then that's good for your reputation. That also is connected to the legal obligation of recycling and different things. And like I said, there will be new legislation, the Environment Bill being passed, hopefully later on this year, which I will talk about, and that will increase the need for recycling. And then obviously reduces waste. The more we recycle, the less we are sending to landfill or the energy from waste. And a lot of people don't realize, but actually it's a cost saving in terms of our cost infrastructure and many waste management companies. It's cheaper to recycle for us to collect a bin that's full of recycling than it is to collect a bin full of general waste. And these are obviously a couple of things why we recycle, but then we each have our own reasons why we do it. And then we've got the waste hierarchy, which is sort of an oversimplified way of thinking about recycling and why we recycle. And you've got landfill at the bottom, which is the worst case scenario for any items that you throw away. We're a zero to landfill company, so we don't send any of our waste or recycling to landfill. We send it to energy recovery. Now, as you can see, that's just one step up from landfill. So we still don't want things to go to energy recovery. We would rather it to be recycled, which is the next step up, but it's better than landfill. And then you've got recycling, and then often in a waste hierarchy, that's where it finishes with reduce, reuse, recycle. But as a waste management company, we like to think more about the prevention and the minimalization of waste. So creating awareness among staff is a big thing that we do, like a presentation like this with different facilities managers and different staff members, thinking about what waste is in the building and how you can better prevent creating waste and sending it to energy recovery and different things like that. And obviously, if you start at the very top and do that, then it's not as important, the things further down. So now we're just going to talk about where your recycling goes. So as a waste management company, we keep almost everything stays within the UK of all the waste and recycling that we collect. The only thing that leaves the UK is office paper, and that goes to the green fields in northern France. And the reason why it leaves the UK is just because actually geographically it's closer to the nearest paper mill that we could send the quantities of waste that we collect to, and they can recycle the waste and turn it back into office paper. So it's a closed loop story, and we can provide you with that paper. So that's one of the benefits of that plant, and that's why we send the paper there. But then everything else stays within the UK. And as you can see, it's mainly focused around the London area. We're a London-only waste management company. We also have an office down in Brighton, but mainly London-focused. So we try and keep it as close to there as possible. So when we collect your recycling, and everything apart from general waste, it goes back to our material recovery facility. So this is our MRF. It was recently upgraded. It's all shiny and new there back in September 2019. It's obviously not as clean and shiny now after a couple of years of recycling being passed through it. But your mixed recycling, or your paper cans and plastic containers, as we like to call it now, will go through this facility, and your plastic bottles will be separated, your aluminium cans will be separated, and paper and so on, and then will be baled up and sent to those locations that we saw previously. So with your paper cans and plastics, like I said, it'll go to our facility. It'll all be separated out. We've got some elements of hand sorting. We've got some magnets. We've got some ballistic separators, a big piece of kit that does lots of different things. And then it'll all get separated off into its individual streams. So in the top left there, you've got cardboard and paper all baled together and then sent off to be recycled. For your food recycling, so we do that on an exchange service. So with your food bins, the food in the loading bay, we will remove that bin and deliver you a clean, fresh new bin. And then with that, we will send that to anaerobic digestion. So we will send that to biogen. And the reason we send it to biogen rather than to composting is because what happens at the anaerobic digester is that you'll get two outputs. So one output will be the biofertilizer, the compost that will then be used to create food, which will then go in your food bin, which will then be sent back and so on. So again, another good closed loop story. But with the anaerobic digestion, there's a biogas that's created from the composting of that food. And then that biogas is then used to create clean, renewable electricity. And another thing that we do with our food collections is, for every food waste collection we do on site, we donate 25p on your behalf to a charity, Fair Share. Fair Share is a food redistribution charity that gives food to vulnerable people. And this isn't food that's gone out of date or is moldy or anything like that. It's maybe food where the packaging has been damaged on transport, or if the carrot just isn't perfectly straight, it's at a slight angle and the supermarket doesn't want to display it, then the Fair Share will take that food and then it will give it to a vulnerable person. And then that stat at the bottom, so in 2019, the Crown Estate, and from all the collections that we did, you donated 1,721 meals to vulnerable people. I did the 2019 stat because 2020 isn't a fair reflection on what would happen during normal times. So that's why I did the 2019 stats. With your glass recycling, again, we would collect that either on an RCV, so we can tip them into one vehicle and then send it off, or we would do it on an exchange service. So we would remove a glass bin and then give you a clean, fresh one. And then that'll get recycled back into glass again. The best thing about glass is that it can be recycled an infinite amount of times. Paper can maybe be recycled around 7 or so times. There's with new technologies, it's going up to maybe 12 to 14 times. But glass can be recycled an infinite amount of times as long as it's kept in that recycling loop. And there's always a lot of confusion about, green bottles, brown bottles, clear bottles, things like that. With our glass collections, you can put them all together in one bin, and then when we send it to our reprocessor, they are then able to separate out the different colors. Another thing with glass and with any sort of bottle, we like to recommend to keep the caps or keep the bottle tops on top of glass bottles when you recycle it. A reason for this is, we'll go on to talk more about contamination later, but if you imagine you've put a glass bottle, a plastic bottle in a mixed recycling bin, and then someone decides to put their leftover pot noodle in that bin, and then those noodles and that liquid then go into the plastic bottle or the glass bottle, and then it might make it harder to recycle that item. But if you put a lid on top of it, then it's less likely to have contamination inside it. Okay, we also do coffee recycling. This isn't all sites, but we can provide coffee recycling for all sites. The other waste streams are a bit more mainstream. With coffee, we send that to BioBean, and what happens is they send it and then they dry out the coffee grounds and they press it, and then that releases biochemicals. So the oils are then used and they get repurposed, normally in the cosmetics industry, and then those dried out coffee beans are then, are then made into sort of coffee logs or coffee pellets, and you might have seen these at supermarkets or on Amazon and things like that, and they can just be put on fires and wood burning stoves. And because coffee has such a high calorific content, it burns actually hotter than a wood would. So coffee, and again, it's a good you can personally buy these coffee logs that then your coffee that you're recycling has been used to create. Okay, and then another waste stream that often people don't know that we personally can collect and recycle and repurpose, but an item that is often overlooked but is extremely important is IT equipment. So IT and we do a lot of these collections on occasion. And what we would do is, if it's an item that can be reused, so let's say an old laptop that you don't want anymore because your office has got new laptops, we can collect them and we can wipe the hard drives to a Blanco standard. I think it's Blanco standard 3, I think we do, but I need to double check that. But we wipe them and we can give you a certificate to say that all that data has been destroyed, and then we can repurpose those laptops. If they can't be repurposed, then what we do is we'll take them apart and we'll take away all the precious minerals and materials that are in a laptop. So in a motherboard of laptops, in 1 ton of motherboards and 1 ton of gold ore or gold mining ore, there's more gold in the laptops than you would find in a ton from the ground. Again, like I was saying, this is often an overlooked thing. If you think now about how many old mobile phones you have just sitting in a cupboard, thinking, I know I've got about 3 or 4, just thinking, oh, I'll keep that one, and who knows when I'll need it. But again, all those precious materials are in there, and often these materials are found in developing countries, and the process in getting them are not all often the safest. Reggie Yates did a documentary probably 3 or 4 years ago now, when he went and investigated how these laptops and things, how the materials are mined, but then also what if you don't dispose of them correctly, where they end up. And there's a video of them just burning laptops just in a fire, and then they wait for it to cool down and then remove the materials from there. And then we also do batteries and toners, so we can provide you with bins to collect batteries and toners. Batteries are especially important because if you put them in a general waste bin or a mixed recycling bin that goes on the back of our vehicle, they can get very hot and the mechanisms in there, and then a fire can ensue from our vehicles. And then finally, so your general waste disposal. What we do with the general waste is we would collect it, and then in the picture in the top right hand side, that's along the River Thames. So there's a barge that has these big containers on the back. You may have seen it go along the Thames, and that is actually full of general waste. So there's lots of tipping stations along the river. So we would go and tip the general waste in there, and then it would all be filled into these containers, and then they would use the water waste to send it to Corey, which is an energy from waste plant in the east of London. This system is the only system that uses a waterway to transport general waste in the whole world, and it saves around 100,000 vehicle movements in the city each year. And then, so the general waste is burnt and incinerated, and then the energy that's created from that is then used to create electricity. Okay, and then, so we're just going to have a little look now at your recycling figures, and obviously this is the whole Crown estate we are looking at, so not individual sites or anything. And again, I've used your 2020 waste data. I think it's because what we found is even though waste streams and waste volumes have diminished quite a lot recently, the makeup of the waste hasn't changed too much. So this is probably a fair reflection of what it was in 2019 and so on. So as you can see, I've simplified this again because some sites do certain waste streams, some sites do other waste streams. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible just to give an overview. So you can see that food makes up about 14%, recycled items, so that includes your plastics, your paper, your your all sorts, and then general waste about 38%. So your 2020 recycling rate was 62%. And 62% is a good recycling rate, I would say. I know your target is probably slightly higher, but I would say 62% overall is for a whole estate is quite good. But with that 62%, that doesn't necessarily take into fact the problem of contamination. So what I mean by contamination is that when you put an item in the wrong waste stream, then that is contamination. So if you put food in your mixed recycling bin, that is material in the wrong waste stream. But then another form of contamination is an accepted material prepared in the wrong way. So DMR is dry mixed recycling, and like I was using the pot noodle example, obviously other noodles are available. But if you were to put the pot noodle in your mixed recycling bin and it was still filled with noodles and liquids, you put that in, that material is accepted in the mixed recycling stream. However, it's not clean and dry, so therefore it's not prepared in the right way. So now we're just going to have a think about there's quite a few in this call, so I won't call people out, but we'll just go through a couple of different items which we find are the most contaminated items. So the things that we often find are in the wrong waste stream or prepared in the wrong way. So tissue. So this is tissue paper, kitchen towels, blue paper, things like that. Often we find these in the mixed recycling stream. However, tissue cannot be recycled. There are two reasons for this. One is, like I said earlier, how paper can only be recycled maybe 7 or so times. As paper gets recycled, so if you think your high quality paper that you have in your office when you do your nice documents, when it gets recycled, it's good quality. When it's get recycled, maybe it goes down into your printer paper because the fibers that make up that material are getting shorter, and then as they get shorter, it's harder to bond with other fibers, and then the quality of that material diminishes. So as it goes through the process, paper gets recycled, fibers get smaller and smaller, and then when they're sort of at their end of life, they get turned into tissue paper. So if the tissue paper was to go to a paper recycling mill, when it is shredded and the fibers are cut, it won't be able to bond with new fibers. Another thing is that this tissue paper has a waterproof quality to it that other paper doesn't have, so therefore the process of recycling it would be different. Unwashed pots, tubs, and trays, like I said with the pot noodle example. But then often people are like, oh, what unwashed? I know you want dry, but what is dry and what is unwashed and things? And the general rule of thumb that we tell people is if you're confident on putting it on top of your head and not getting any gloop on top of you, then you can put it in the mixed recycling. Obviously, we want them to be clean and dry, and and if you can, then please do it as much as possible. But we know, sometimes that isn't always the case. But yes, if you think about it, that if I put this in, could it contaminate other items? So if you've got some liquid in it, or if you've got some pasta left, can this contaminate other items? And if I put this through a recycling process, would it be able to be recycled? So like we said, we want them to be clean and dry, but a general rule of thumb is put it on top of your head. And if you need to wash your hair again, then don't put it in the mixed recycling. And then this is a pet peeve of mine and something that mainly we find in offices is if you think about, you get these different magazines through the door and they're wrapped in this plastic and you think, oh, I don't want to read this, or I'm not going to bother with this. So you put it straight in the mixed recycling. But a problem with this is at our material recovery facility, like I said, there's lots of different systems to separate out the materials. And one of them is an infrared detecting system that will scan down on that item, and it'll scan down and say, it will read PET plastic bottle, you go left, aluminum can, you go right, type thing. So with this, when the infrared jet scans down this item, it will see LDPE, so it will see a flimsy plastic which can't be recycled, so it will be sent off to not be recycled. But the fact is that there is a magazine in there full of good quality paper that could be recycled. So with this item, all you need to do is separate them out, put the paper in, put the magazine in the mixed recycling, and then put the plastic in general waste, because that can't be recycled. And then here are some other items that just generally people think about. I've spoken previously about the bottle tops. They can be recycled, but please put them back on top of the bottles. That salad wrapper, this is often very confusing because different supermarkets have different labels for these. But that sort of plastic can't be recycled in your mixed recycling stream. So it is LDPE, so low density polyethylene. And it's the same quality that makes up your plastic carrier bags, so that you get from the supermarket. And often those supermarkets will say, bring your plastic bags back to us and we will recycle them. And that is true. If you collect, a vast quantity of that material, then you can send it off to be recycled. In theory, anything in the world can be recycled if there is an economic value to it. But because this is a low-grade plastic and is very light and flimsy and gets tangled and there's all sorts of problems with it, just having 2 or 3 of them in the system, they can't be recycled. So please put them in the general waste. The blue paper towels, the same as tissues, they can't be recycled, and those are sort of soup pots, polystyrene soup pots, and polystyrene can't be recycled either. Again, it's a very low quality plastic that isn't economically viable to recycle. Okay, so now I've told you all the hard things, but I haven't really given you any solutions to it. So with this, so like I said previously, there's an environment bill that what we were hoping was going to be made into law in the springtime this year, but it's been delayed, and hopefully we think it's going to be passed in the autumn time of this year. And what it's going to do is it's got a big emphasis on contamination and segregation. So with contamination at the minute, like I was saying previously with your recycling statistics, if you give us a recycling bin full of general waste, you will record that as mixed recycling because it left your facility, your building, your premises as mixed recycling. But then after we sorted through it, we realized it was all general waste, but you would not record that. You would record that as mixed recycling. But that law is going to change with this environment bill, not necessarily as soon as it gets passed, but within the next few years. So your recorded statistics will be based on what we recycle from it. So if you did have a mixed recycling bin that left your premises full of general waste, we collected it, we separate it out, we find it's all general waste, then you would record that as general waste. So that's why it's really important that these ideas of contamination and making sure we know what can and can't be recycled are kind of going to become even more prevalent. And with greater focus on source segregation, it's going to be law that businesses have segregated food waste in their premises. So at the minute, you do not have to have food waste recycling at your premises. In Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, that is law, but in England, it is not currently law. That will become law, and then over time, more waste streams such as aluminium cans or plastic bottles will become mandatory. Okay, and then some other good things to know. So I'm sure you've all seen these symbols before and you look at them and you're like, I have no idea what they mean. On the top left, we've got the RIC codes. These are found on plastic, on any sort of plastic container. And obviously you would look at those symbols and think, okay, it's a triangle, it's got arrows going around in a circle. Obviously that means it could be recycled. Well, no, that would be too simple. That doesn't mean it could be recycled. This is simply a code which tells you what type of plastic it is. So number one is PET. So that would be your plastic water bottles. Number two, LDPE. Number three, HDPE, and so on. What we say is a general rule of thumb is number 1, 2, and 5 can be recycled. So if you see a plastic bottle with 1, 2, or 5, or a plastic container with 1, 2, and 5, then they can be recycled. In the bottom left, this is a new initiative that the different organizations are trying to implement, and you might have recognized them on different supermarkets have started them. That it'll also say this on them. So it'll say, yes, can be recycled, no, can't be recycled, or there's also a black symbol without a line on it that'll say, check your local recycling or something like that. So that's a lot simpler way to understand if it can or can't be recycled. And then on the right-hand side, we have the green dot, which again, it's green, obviously, environmental green. Yes, it's got arrows that go around in a circle. Yes, obviously that means it could be recycled. But again, obviously that would be far too easy. And no, that doesn't necessarily mean it can be recycled. This symbol is an EU directive, which businesses would sign up to, and they would use that symbol if they have paid a levy towards the safe disposal of that material. So the safe disposal of that material could be putting it safely in a landfill. So that symbol does not necessarily mean it can be recycled. This is also an EU directive that the UK did not sign up to, regardless of Brexit. The symbol's been around for a long time. It's an EU directive that the UK did not sign up to. So that symbol literally means absolutely nothing in the UK. It is just there to make our lives difficult. And then another thing that's good to know, just thinking about, what you can do to help. So again, we spoke at the start about why we recycle, because we want to protect the environment. It's often the main reason why people recycle. And there's a lot more to the process of recycling than you just putting it in the bin. So here, paper round, we're introducing electric vehicles into our fleet. So we've got a box vehicle, like in the picture you can see there, and an RCV that will hopefully be on the roads over the summertime. We were hoping they would be on the roads by now, but they have been a victim to Brexit and retrofitting and laws and things. But we're hoping by summer they should be on the road. And also we're in the process of releasing our net zero sustainability ambitions. So we are going to sign up to a science-based target of reducing our emissions based on the 2-degree process. And we are also in the middle of creating a tool which will allow our clients to look at the carbon emissions associated with their collections, including the vehicle movements and the actual process of recycling it or disposing it or whatever, and looking at the carbon emissions that are associated with that, and also the carbon savings that you have from recycling, let's say, a plastic bottle instead of putting it in landfill. Okay, and that's all I was going to talk about today. We spoke about why we recycle, what happens to recycling in your waste. We had a brief little look at your recycling figures. Again, that's the whole Crown Estate overlook. We identified the main contamination issues and which items we find often that are in the wrong streams. We talked a few different things that are good to know with the upcoming Environment Bill, what we're doing here at Paper Round to help reduce carbon emissions and to try and navigate the minefield of labeling, especially around plastic materials, and then recycling at home. I apologize, I'm not sure what that means. Thank you, everyone. And if anyone has any questions, I will stop sharing my screen and see if there are any in the chat. I can't see any questions, but if anyone has any questions, then